All right, guys, this is John here with Beyond the Paddle. Got a very special guest tonight, John Shin of Big Bass Blessings. Uh, he is a big bait guru. I'm very excited to have him on. Been wanting to do this for a while, and John was kind enough to give us some of his time, even though he's out traveling on the road right now. John, thank you for being here. Got lots of questions. Looking forward to lots of good information from you, brother. You've been doing okay?
Man, it's been busy. It's just it's grind. I haven't had as much time to fish as I would like to, um, due to personal stuff at home, and then the day job, of course. So that's kind of been keeping me from being on the water as much as I would like to. But we're still kicking, right?
That's good. That's good. I hear you. Well, sometimes those jobs they do seem to get in the way, but they are a necessity.
Oh yeah.
So I've got a group of guys. My mainstay people are kayak fishermen, and I know you fish from the bank, you fish from a kayak, fish from a boat. Done that for years. Have spent thousands and thousands of countless hours studying fish behavior, uh, topographical maps. I couldn't even fathom to begin the ways that you've studied, but I'm real excited to hear about them, and I know these guys are too. So
Okay.
I'll just kick it off. I told them mainly that we were probably going to be talking about big glide baits, big swim baits, and loved the little uh, video you done on the A rig the other
Yeah.
day on Big Bass Blessings, guys. If you're not a member of that community on Facebook, I highly encourage you to be, because brother, you're missing out on some platinum if you're not, because it's there. This man has got it figured out.
So I created the Big Bass Blessings group page because I wanted a space where I could just unload information that I maybe would be reluctant to post on YouTube or a larger public platform, to help anglers that are genuinely curious about taking it to the next level, right? A lot of times, though, the information that I put out there on Big Bass Blessings is like really high level information. And I know that when I do my seminars and I'm reaching out to, let's say, you know, a novice angler that may not understand the concepts of different fall rates for certain types of plastics or different sink rates for ABS or resin baits based on water temperature, that concept might be like totally foreign to somebody that's kind of new to all of this, right?
Yeah.
So in Big Bass Blessings, what I did was I kind of wanted to create a platform where not just tournament anglers, but just hardcore anglers that want to really elevate their game and stand apart from other people. Because I have a massive list of things that I've been doing that allowed me to be really successful on the water that I didn't share with hardly anybody for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And I started slowly leaking that stuff out, like the A-Rig video you saw where I talk about how just changing the swim baits can help you target different depth zones more efficiently and without fatiguing yourself. You know,
Man, I can't tell you the number of dollars in swim baits that I've left at the bottom of the lake. And I got tired of losing them. So I was like, there's got to be a better way to skin this cat, because,
mhm,
20 bucks a shot or 40 bucks a shot, whatever you're spending just on the A rig
mhm.
itself, not including, the swim baits and the heads and all that. I mean, you can drop 50 bucks on your first cast if you're not real careful. I was like, there's got to be a better way to skin this cat.
You
So I
know,
started trying to figure some things out on my own, and then I watched your stuff, and I was like, "Oh, okay, here it is."
unfortunately, the breakoffs, they're going to happen regardless. Every now, nobody never breaks off, right? Like
Right, unless
we're
you're
all,
not.
So, I backlash, sometimes too. And then especially, if you're a kayak angler, sometimes you just can't position yourself perfectly in accordance to the wind and current. And when you're trying to line up that perfect cast in a hurry, if you're drifting, 1.5 miles an hour, then you might mess up a cast, and that does happen. But for me, it's always been like there's this, especially glide baits and swim baits too. It's the money was never an issue if it performed. Okay,
Right.
like if it performed. And that doesn't mean that I fish only $200 baits, because if you go back and look, I've caught double digits on $15 baits, swim baits, you know? So it's not just about the cost of the bait, but if it performs, I'm all about like form over, like, I guess, function, because people complain about durability and a bunch of other stuff, but if it does its job, I don't care what I have to pay for it. I'll do it. But what people need to understand is it's rarely ever just a bait. Even the A-rig, even if I taught you how to, let's say you're so specific with me, say, I want to target fish that are suspended over treetops. The depth is in 60 feet of water, but these trees top out at 27 feet. I can help you design an A-rig that will perfectly target that depth, and you can control that depth like very efficiently without worrying about that A-rig burying itself in the bushes or in the trees or riding too high. Yeah, changing the style of heads and swim baits, you can do that. And that's kind of what the point of that video is. But in the wrong hands, in somebody that doesn't really understand the fundamentals of how to position their rod, how fluorocarbon changes the sink rate. The line can pull and drag your bait down, your A-rig down. And if you don't understand all these things, then in the wrong hands, you're still going to lose it sometimes. That's why it's so important to understand the fundamentals before you. And I tell people this too, like, it's important to not skip the important stuff, the boring stuff, right? Understanding line properties, rod ratings, why a certain rod is better for a certain application, why a certain line is better for a certain application. That's kind of where it all begins.
Yeah.
And that's the technical stuff that's boring, but people would rather just go on, a Facebook group page and be like, hey, I have this bait. Would this rod be able to handle this bait? What line should I use? Well, just tie the thing on and go fish it, man. You'll find out pretty quick.
Yeah, I think we live in a society. Let's see if I can say this and make it make sense. We live in a disposable society where people are used to going to, I'll just use Academy or Bass Pro Shops for an example, and they go over there and they buy whatever they seen this guy on YouTube using last week, and they get it out of the package and they throw it a few times, and if it swims great, it swims great. They may catch a few fish on it. If it doesn't swim great, they throw it over there in the corner and they never look at it again. They never learn to adjust, to adapt. Uh, you know, they don't dig into the fundamentals, like you said, like what does monofilament, what does 10-pound monofilament do on this bait? What does 20-pound do? What does 20 or 10-pound fluorocarbon do for this? What if I throw it on a braid with a mono leader or a fluoro? I respect all of the things that you have been doing and keeping in your back pocket all these years, because whether you're a competitive angler or not, you're always in competition with the fish.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like any pro sport. There's always an advantage, and that advantage usually involves work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really the most important thing is what's between the ears. It's not the boat, it's not the kayak, it's not your $1,000 setups and your $200 baits. It is truly between the ears, and that alone can make anybody a dangerous angler, regardless of what you have access to. That's why I don't ever shy away from fishing from the bank. I have a tournament rigged kayak, full out electronics. It's a Native Slayer Max. I have everything you could want on it. I don't compete, and I love fishing out of it, and I fish out of it often. But if I only have an hour or two after work, I'm not gonna put the boat up, go launch it. And my home lake obviously is gigantic. In order for me to hit some of my waters, I'd have to pedal out probably just 45 minutes just to get out to some of the spots I want to get out to. So, but rather than do that, I'll just go and park my car in my home lake or walk off to the end of a main lake point and just throw around a big giant swim bait to see if I can't pull up some fish that I know should be there anyway.
Right.
Right. So I tell people all the time, it's never about because you hear all the time, man, if only I had a kayak, only if I had a boat, only if I had a 250 and not a 125. There's always these never-ending myriad of excuses, but I think that I don't want to say that people are lazy. I think the problem is they don't know where to get good information. There's too much information now.
Right. There's so much out there. You don't know what's good or not. There's a lot of propaganda out there, and I was speaking with last week with Jeff Sprague about some different baits, and I know you don't know the lady. She's done passed now, but lady here in our community that was a staple in the fishing community. Her name was Betty Evans, and she owned a bait shop for probably 65 years. And she said, we sell two kinds of bait in this bait shop, the same two kinds that they sell everywhere else. We sell bait that catches fish. We sell bait that catches fishermen. And right now, the waters can be really muddy deciding which of those two work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that every bait that's made right now can catch fish, but we're all so different. We all have different preferences and different styles. What I like to fish isn't going to be the same as what somebody else likes to fish. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's why you always have these mixed answers. I mean, it's something as simple as like the jack or chatterbait, right? What's your favorite chatterbait? There are people that will say the regular Z-Man chatterbait is every bit as good as the jackhammer. And there are people that say the jackhammer is light years better than the standard Z-Man chatterbait. And I'm like, well, there are physical properties. And if you've ever fished them all before, you know that they all do feel different.
Right.
But because our styles are different, maybe I don't even need a chatterbait to start up immediately the way I fish. And then I don't need a jackhammer,
Yeah.
So there's all these different variables that come into play. And if you've conditioned yourself, for instance, to fish efficiently, be a good angler with an ugly stick, you have no need to go out and spend $600 on a G Loomis NRX Plus.
Right.
Yeah. Now, if you understand why a G Loomis NRX Plus or a G Loomis Conquest is so expensive, why you need a rod like that for whatever application, then by all means, nobody should tell you how to spend your money.
Absolutely.
But if you don't understand why that rod costs $700, then there's no need for you to get it.
Right.
But if you go online and see all those, everybody always asks, what's the best rod for this application? What's the best rod for that application? Without fail, you'll get some of those guys that'll be like, hey, buy once, cry once, go get the best there is, and you'll thank me later. I'm like, what?
I like that.
You get that all the time. But then I'm like, even myself, who I fish with quality stuff, but I'm like, what if that person doesn't even understand why that rod costs? Why would anybody, a rational person, go out and do that? They wouldn't. Doesn't make sense, So, like, even though I go out and try to help people when it comes to the value of good tackle, I'm just like, dude, whatever your budget will allow you to go out and stomach, spending, that's what you should start with. That's never go put a rod or a reel on a credit card because somebody told you to, or whatever. But it's so crazy these days. Like when I see people, especially in the swim bait community, if you've paid attention to like the actual swim bait community, geez, it's a hoot, man. It's a hoot.
So I got a comment here, and I think I'm going to interpret it correct. It says, where and how with all his extra info to learn the basics. So I think it means like, where do they go to learn the basics?
Go to the lake, man. Go to the pond.
Yeah,
Go to the lake, go to the pond, go to the river, wherever you fish, and tie it on and throw it. Because no matter what I tell you, I can teach you the exact mechanics for any bait that I believe I'm very proficient in. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to duplicate it. The best way to learn is to just go throw it, and you'll see how a bait reacts. You'd be amazed at how much knowledge we actually possess, even if you're not a proficient swim bait angler. If you know how to fish a jerk bait, you will understand how to fish a glide bait. The mechanics are very similar, you know. And if you just have to go out, tie it on, and throw it, and this is something that I see too many people do. You go out and buy a brand new bait, a glide bait, or any swim bait for that matter. What's the first thing most people do? They tie it on, they fire that thing out like 40 yards out of sight, and then start really. I mean, how do you know what that bait is doing?
exactly.
Flip it out in front of you, mess with it. See what the rod pulls do. See what a rod twitch does. See what a little bit of reel chop does to the bait. Transfer that data, and then make that fire long cast out to your target, you know, and fish the bait. But how are you going to fish it if you don't even know what the bait does?
Right. So take us through. I guess let's go through. If you were a brand new guy that was just wanting to get into swim bait fishing or glide bait fishing or a rig fishing, you wanted to get into all three of them, but you could, and just say you had a $300 budget, line, rod, reel, and bait. Take us through some that someone could get started for
Okay.
say 300-400 bucks.
So first, here's what I'll say. Um, don't get caught up in thinking you're ever going to throw a 6 to 8 ounce bait when you're just starting. Don't even put that in your mind. Don't plant that seed even yet. Okay. Get familiar with those typical 6 to 8 inch size baits that are anywhere from 1 to 3 ounces. That's a very easy area to learn, and that's also, especially if you're a tournament angler, there are certain situations, certain times of the year where you can fill a limit with the 7, 8 inch glide. And if you do catch five, guess what? The rest of the field is fucked. Okay. Because if you catch five, they're going to be bigger. All right. So I'll tell you this, stick with the rod, 1 to 4 ounce rating. In my mind, there are a myriad of options now. Okay. Daiwa makes a very good entry level swim bait rod, which is, I think, $100, $120. The Dobyns Fury 795 is a good entry level swim bait rod, also under $150.
Okay.
And Dobyns is a local Texas company, you know, and they have like a pretty good warranty rod replacement system. So if you do break your rod, I believe it's for a Fury like $70, and you get a new rod if you do break it. Right?
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's how it works.
Yeah, they're actually based out of Sulphur Springs, where I work as a paramedic.
I still fish a lot of Dobyns rods. I mean, I fish a lot of boutique rods, but I love the Dobyns Champion XP 795. When they have their sales, I think 2 or 3 times a year, Dobyns has a sale on their rods for like 30% off. I would grab one if it's in your budget. I think they retail for $279, but when it's on sale, you can get it for somewhere in that $200 range.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to reels, stick to something that's palmable and comfortable. If you start off with a bulky 300 size or a 400 size reel, because in your mind you think, well, eventually I'm going to throw 6 to 8 ounce baits, so I need this massive reel with massive line capacity. Don't do that. Get a 200 size reel. These days, most 200 size reels are very, very capable. Enough line capacity, enough drag output, like a Shimano Corrado 200K, you know, which is sub $200. You know, Daiwa Tatula 200, sub $200. And as far as gear ratio goes, if you get 7 to 1, that's a good all around for soft baits and glide baits. If you're going to use one to learn it all, a 7 to 1. I wouldn't go with the 6 to 1. I wouldn't go with the 5 to 1, because trying to keep up with the glide bait on a slower gear ratio reel with less line retrieval per crank can be a bit of a nightmare. You're going to be winding a lot more than you need to be. With my glide baits, I fish 8 to 1. gear ratios for my glide baits across the board. I don't care if it's a 8-ounce bait or if it's a 1.5-ounce bait. It's 8-to-1.
8-to-1. Okay.
Yes, and that's you'll get to understand why that is so good if you actually go out and fish it. You'll understand. It'll register. So if you have a $400 budget, if I had to pick one combo, Dobyns Fury 795 with a Daiwa Tatula 200. I mean, brand spanking new, and then 20-pound. Now, this is another one of those topics where it's controversial. I would recommend braid to leader only because you're more versatile. You can do so many different things just by swapping out your leader, right? You can put a long fluorocarbon leader on it and get your depth. Obviously, you still get some shock absorption. Stretch really isn't that big of it's actually plays against you too much, stretch in most cases. So, I like fishing. If I go usually 40-pound braid to 20-pound leader, but I've been doing this a long time. When I tell people that, they freak out. They're like, you throw 4-ounce baits on 40-pound braid to 20-pound leader, and they freak out. They're like, you must really like breaking baits off. I'm like, no. If you understand how to make these casts, you don't need a full-blown, firing cast. Rarely do you need a cast like that. Just control the bait and be comfortable with it and get good at connection knots. Like, I preach the FG knots so much because it really is probably, in my mind, the only streamlined 100% strength connection that exists. Streamlined, meaning it'll pass through your line guide in the reel, it'll pass through your guides on your rod, even micro guides, and you can actually reel it onto your reel. And that's just one of those knots you have to practice, in my mind. Like, it's good all around, especially if you're gonna have one setup. We're talking one setup. That's the way to be ultimately universal.
So you would use the FG knot as your line connection. What would you tie from your leader to your bait? What are you going to connect that with?
Usually it's a double uni. So I double the line and tie a uni. 3-turn cinch knot, basically.
Right.
But it depends. If it's fluorocarbon, I never tie a Palomar knot with fluorocarbon. It'll always be a cinch knot or a uni. If it's braid, then I'll tie a Palomar. But usually it's just you double up your line and you tie a uni. That's it. 3-turn uni. And you have 3 tag ends. It's a very strong knot.
All right. So what would you suggest for an entry-level glide bait, entry-level swim bait, entry-level A-rig setup?
Well, I will tell you that if you follow like my Instagram at Fish Insanity, the Shimano Armor Joint is a $40 bait. I don't know how many fish I've caught on that bait, to be honest with you. It's hundreds, maybe thousands if we include striper. It's only been out about a year. It's a hybrid. You can glide it, you can swim it, you can work it creepy crawly slow, you can burn it, you can weigh the bait down to get it to whatever depth you want to get it down to. Out of the box, the slow floating version will dive down about 2 to 3 feet when you start turning the handle and then slowly float up. It now recently came out with the slow sink model, which actually sinks pretty slow. When it comes to glide baits, I'm gonna tell everybody a tip and a secret. That whole buying 3 different modes, sink rates, like a slow sink, medium sink, fast sink, or a floating, that's a gimmick, y'all. You buy a floating bait and you learn to weigh it down to get whatever sink rate you want out of that bait. You can tune any floating glide bait to sink at whatever rate you want, and it will still swim true. All you need are those cheapo boards, the weight strips.
Tell us how.
Okay. So I specifically use Zapu weight boards, which is a Japanese company. You can find them on Tackle Warehouse. You can find them at the Hookup Tackle. But they're basically lead weight strips that come in increments of 1 gram and 2 gram. Now, these glide baits are so sensitive that just by adding a gram in some cases will turn a floating bait into a slow sinking bait.
They're just teetering right on the edge, huh?
So, for instance, on the slow floating Arma joint, the Shimano Arma joint, I don't even put a whole gram on there. I put 3/4 of a gram on it, and now that bait slow sinks and almost suspends. And that's how I fish it right now. Now, if I'm going to another body of water, and if I'm graphing and I see that the fish are suspended a little bit deeper, then I'll add a little bit more weight to the belly of the bait to get it to sink a little bit faster, to fish it efficiently a little bit deeper. So I'll tell people, go ahead.
Speaking of that bait in specific, say if 3/4 of an ounce, does that cause it to suspend at say 6 feet? And then if you add or 3/4 of a gram. Yeah. So if you add 3/4 of a gram, say in 50-degree water, say it suspends at 6 foot. If you add a whole gram, is it going to suspend at a deeper, or is it going
to sink? It'll slow sink faster. So,
but what I'm saying is, that does there become a depth level that bait becomes buoyant, have buoyancy again?
Effectively, I haven't fished it any deeper than 7 to 8 feet. Okay. Now, here's the thing about glide baits and swim baits in general. They draw fish up. You hear about drawing power. That drawing power isn't just lateral. It's also from bottom up.
Right.
So especially if you fish very clear reservoirs. If your impoundment or a reservoir has, 5-6 feet of visibility, these fish will move great distances for these baits. Even top, man, I fish for smallmouth a lot, as you know. I've had smallmouth come up from 30 feet.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a minute.
But yeah, there is drawing power. So you don't necessarily, and I don't fish with forward-facing sonar. When I tell people I target smallmouth without forward-facing sonar, they lose their shit. They think I'm lying. But it's because of the styles of baits that I use. Yeah. I can pull these fish, and that's for anybody that doesn't fish with forward-facing sonar. There is no better fish finder than a big old swim bait.
Man, I'm a firm believer in that. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been throwing a big glide bait and have 3 or 4 followers and go right behind it with a swim jig and capitalize on it, or a jerk bait, or even a spinner bait, and sometimes even a top water, just depending on what time of year it is. And that thing will draw them like a magnet, and all of a sudden you're in the neighborhood, and then you go to chopping wood after that.
Oh yeah, and when you fish these big baits, your first cast is your most important cast. I tell people that your first cast is so important that it could either make you or it could ruin that spot entirely for you. Because these glide baits and any big swim bait has so much drawing power that if a fish chooses, or if an entire school of fish choose to follow that bait out and you do not know how to capitalize on that moment, you have just completely ruined that spot and blown your cover. It will take them who knows how long to reset. And sometimes there's no follow-up cast that'll work because all they do is disperse, depending on what they were holding on and what you pulled them off of. Especially offshore fish, this happens. When they're holding on brush piles offshore, you pull back, 50, 60 feet, 70 feet, you fire your glide bait, you pull up the entire damn spool, you see them following it. They come all the way to the boat and they see the boat and bail. Yeah, and that happens so many times.
Yeah. So, speaking of the smallmouth, I know your personal quest, but a lot of people here may not. Talk to us about your personal smallmouth quest. I think it's quite unique.
I'm trying to catch a 7-pound southern smallie out of Texas, I've been trying to do this for about 2 years now. And I'm fairly certain that I've had it, a 7+ hooked up at least 2 or 3 times and lost that fish. As is the case when you fish the baits that I do, you end up unfortunately sometimes losing. I've gotten a lot better at keeping these fish pinned, but especially early on, you know, when I'm throwing glide baits and big soft baits for smallmouth that have small mouths and are acrobatic, you end up losing quite a few. Uh, but I'm after a 7 pound smallie here in Texas, mainly because I got burned out from largemouth. I was chasing, you know, big trophy largemouth for a long time, and I was in a real negative headspace. Like I was mad at largemouth for no reason, you know. When you're chasing like double digits and you catch like a 7 or 8 pounder and you're pissed because it's not 2 pounds more, you feel like punting that thing back into the lake. That's a bad place to be.
Yeah,
So
that's a fish of a lifetime for a lot of people.
oh yeah, and I decided, you know, I live basically on Texoma where there's a huge smallmouth population. I just never heard of anybody specifically targeting them because they're so pelagic. They're hard to actually target. They're all over the damn place. So I spent the last 2 years basically doing that, figuring them out.
Yeah, that's one fish that I have never really set out to catch. I would love to. Just, you know, we're in Texas. Really and truly, I know there's more than Lake Texoma that has smallmouths
Mhm,
in it.
mhm,
Walking out here where I live has a smallmouth limit. I've never heard of anyone catching a smallmouth, or
mhm.
even as far as that goes, a spotted bass. Uh, it's all largemouth, and they're the old Texas strain um, largemouth. You know, they're long and skinny, and
Yeah.
uh, there are some Florida strain bass in there now. They have been putting some actual Lunkers in there the last few years, or their offspring. So I'm looking for that lake to turn around. But I know Hubbard. I know some, people have caught smallmouths on Hubbard. Don't know about size wise or anything, but I do know there's a lot on Texoma, and I'm going to get up there one of these days and try to do a little angling for some smallmouth.
Yeah, there's quite a few lakes in Texas that do have smallmouth. Like all of the Brazos has smallmouth. Even OHIV has smallmouth.
Yeah,
Grapevine has smallmouth.
yeah,
Um, Meredith, Whitney, Possum Kingdom. But here's the problem: our smallmouth here, I do not know if they could ever get to be more than 7 pounds. And the reason for that is forage. Um,
forage.
and how they, you know, the northern smallmouth only got to that rotund build and size due to the gobies. And it makes sense. Gobies dwell on the bottom. They don't move a whole lot. Smallmouth literally just go down and suck them in all damn day long without covering much ground.
Yeah,
Here,
they don't
they
have.
take that,
Yeah.
so they're always moving.
So yeah. So getting back to, so you told us about the glide bait. You said that was the Shimano Armor Joint.
Armor joint 190.
One.
The SF is the slow float, and the SS is the slow sink. And you can get those at Lake Pro Tackle, guys. And use,
Yep. Those
if
are
you use
good guys.
code MOVE10 and you get 10% off free shipping for any order over $50.
Now, what was that?
If you go to lakeprotackle.com, and they have the entire lineup of the armor joints in stock right now. I checked not long ago. And if you use code NEW, NEW and number 10 on your first order, it's 10% off, and it's free shipping for any order over $10 or $50. Sorry, free shipping for any order over $50.
Oh, for $50. Okay, well, that's still a good deal.
Oh yeah,
Um, so
armor
what?
joints.
What big swim bait, or what swim bait? I shouldn't say big swim bait. I just, I associate you with bigger stuff because I know you throw a lot of bigger stuff. So, but what for a starting out guy that, like I said, is on a budget and wants to get into some of the bigger stuff, not, your 4 and 5 inch Kitex. If you want some bigger swim baits,
Mhm.
like I started out throwing a lot of Savage Gear stuff because
Uh-huh.
it's decent. You can spend $25 and you can get a 9 or 10 inch glide if that's what you want to. I mean, a 9 or 10 inch swim bait.
Mhm.
That's actually not a bad swim bait. That
No, it's
actually
a great bait. It's a
pretty
great
decent.
bait.
You know?
I've caught, if you go on my Instagram, I've caught a double digit on the Savage Gear 8-inch line through trout in Texas. 10 pounds, like 6 ounces or something, from the shore too, from a public reservoir in the winter. But that day, I filled a 43-pound bag, and 2 of the fish out of the top 5 came on that bait, that Savage Gear. And that's like a $22 bait or something, I think.
Right. I was gonna say it's like 20, $25 at the most.
It's an 8-inch line through trout, which it's a great bait. You know, it's not a very fun bait to fish because it's just something that you just slow roll over a main lake point. I basically just gave it an uphill presentation. I fired it all the way to the end of a long point, let it hit bottom. It's about 17 feet at the end of that point. I know because I graphed all the areas that I fished from shore. I had previously graphed out of the boat or kayak, and I knew that how it's laid out, and that's why I'll go hit it from shore. Which is, I guess you could call that cheating, but
No,
I just
I call it studying.
right. But so,
So
anyways,
that's a good point. If you were out on that lake in your kayak or
mhm.
your boat, would you throw from deep to shallow or shallow to deep? I know
Depends
that.
it depends a lot on time of year, um, and also the fishing pressure that day. Now,
Right.
a lot of times, especially on my home lake, we have a lot of derbies. Texoma's notorious for running 3 or 4 derbs simultaneously, and 2 of them will have a 180 plus boat field. You know, on those days like that, and I'm watching all the boats hit some of the spots that I would hit, but every single one of them are hitting it from a downhill presentation. They're casting it to the shore and bringing it back to the boat. If I see them doing it over and over again, and I know there's fish there, then I'm going to come in behind them, put the boat right up on the bank and cast out and bring it uphill. And that's sometimes I've gone behind, I've gotten 5th, 6th, 7th looks at some spots and been able to pluck 4 or 5 pounders going behind all those boats, just offering them a different angle, right? Just because if they're seeing it all the time. And that depends, but in the wintertime, right now, bass don't want to move a lot. So this is big time. This is big time secret right now. But big bass, especially the biggest alpha bass that lives on the end of that point, does not want to chase anything out into open water. They want the advantage. So if they see a big gizzard shad swimming uphill along a bank and getting shallower and shallower, that big 10, 12 pounder knows that fish has nowhere else to go. It can, if it blocks it from going offshore, that bass knows that all it has to do is pin it right up on that, because they're not going over the surface of the water. They just follow it. And a lot of times when I am fishing uphill in the wintertime, I'm going super slow, and I might only have 10, 12 feet of line left on the end of my rod, and then boom, it pins it right there on the bank. And that fish probably was watching that big meal. And there's another thing, 10, 12 pounder is not going to move 20, 30 feet when you have 42-degree water for a shaky head. But for an 8, 10-inch meal where it knows it eats that and it's good for the next 4 days,
Right.
we'll move for it.
Right. It's like bologna sandwich, ribeye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's why in the winter, these big baits work so well. Like, you're not going to catch a ton of fish, obviously, because the flip side of that is, in the summer, in the fall, in the spring, you see a lot of people catching 2, 3 pounders on glide baits, 7, 8-inch glide baits. You see a lot of that. You don't see too much of that in the wintertime. These 2, 3 pounders, they don't want to pick a fight with the big meal like that. It's too much energy. It's too, what if they can't close the deal on that bait? They don't have the energy. But a big 8, 9, 10 pounder just has to suck it in. You know, an 8-inch bait is nothing for an 8-pound bass. Nothing. You got to get that out of your head. Like, you think, oh, that's too big. Go look at some of the photos on my Instagram where I have 8-inch baits choked down the gullet of a 7-pounder, and the bait looks as big as my thumb. But it's a freaking 8-inch, 7-inch bait, you know? So we got it. That's the first thing you need to do if you want to get into swim bait fishing. Get that whole fixed paradigm of, oh, big bait, big bait, big bait. Get that out of your head. It's just a bait. And it's just that happens to be a bait that can target better quality fish. Okay. You know, there's a lot of I guess, misconceptions in bass fishing where, first of all, if a bass is hungry, you cannot reel fast enough to get food away from a bass. They don't make a reel fast enough that can run a bass. And then secondly, no meal is too large. How many times have you seen a bass choking on a crappie that's floating up? You've seen that a lot, right? I mean, if you fish long enough,
You see that on fork quite often still. They'll have a crappie that'll be 12, 14-inch crappie wedged sideways in their mouth.
And that bass usually is not a giant. It's like a 4 or 5 pounder most of the time.
You think to yourself, man, they really bit off more than they could chew. But, you know, how many of them have they ate that they did get down that you don't know about?
Right. I was very amazed when I first started throwing these big baits because I quit bass fishing for a long time, put the rods up. I was done with it. And then my buddy Oliver Nye, he posted that video on YouTube, which is still, I believe to this date, the largest bass ever caught on film, cast to catch.
Yeah.
It's 17 and some change.
Yeah.
On a 9-inch Batesmith Magnum trout swim bait. And I was like, that is crazy. First of all, it's the biggest bass I'd ever seen in my life. I was like, I didn't even, and I live in Texas, and I was like, good night. They get that big, because how often do you see somebody actually film a cast to catch of a 17-pound bass? Obviously, never, right? So when I saw that, I was like, man, that's nuts. So I started talking to him, and just it refueled my passion for bass fishing. Just doing it differently, you know, just not the same old dragging a worm, or not that there's anything wrong with that, but I did that my whole life, you know? And when I saw that, it was like, oh, something special. But to be fair, the first 6 months of me throwing these big baits, because back then there wasn't nearly as much information as there is now. And whatever information good information that did exist, everybody kept it to themselves. They didn't share it.
There wasn't a lot of opening up, and I'm sure there's still a lot of that. But we do appreciate you getting on here and sharing with us. Now, I'm going to leave that A-rig topic up to the listeners here. I'm going to encourage them to go over to Big Bass Blessings and join that group and to view that for themselves. There's invaluable knowledge there. John, I want to thank you for sharing a little bit of your time with us tonight. I look forward to talking with you some more here on the podcast. I really enjoyed tonight, and I hope some people have got some information out of it. I'm sure that they have. Look forward to getting with you and doing some fishing one of these days.
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to. I can't remember the last time I spent a full day out on the water. It's been a while. With my wife being, sick and stuff, it's been tough, but we'll figure something out.
Maybe we can figure something out. But again, I want to thank you for coming on tonight and talking with us. I know that we could sit here and talk for days and not get it all covered, but I do appreciate you opening up to us and kind of letting us into your world a little bit. And like I said, I look forward to having you again, and maybe we can just tackle one subject, and
Yeah.
that would be great if we could spend some time doing that over, the next few months when you have free time. I know the guys here that are involved in Beyond the Paddle and Greenfish Nation would really appreciate it, and appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. John does do some seminars occasionally. I think you've kind of postponed those for a little while now,
I,
have you not?
I did. I do live seminars, usually hosted either on the water or at Lake Pro Tackle in Gainesville, Texas. But I also, every Tuesday, tomorrow included, we do a live podcast on the Big Bass Dreams YouTube channel with Oliver Nye and myself and Samuel Clymer from Lake Pro Tackle, who's the marketing manager there. And a lot of our discussions are based on big baits, because Big Bass Dreams was founded on, on the whole that movement, right?
Right. Now
But
that's Oliver's group, right? Big Bass Dreams.
that's Oliver's company. That's Oliver's platform.
Yeah.
And
Yours is Big Bass Blessings, correct?
mine's Big Bass Blessings. Yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure I got that straight.
Yes. But you can find me on Big Bass Dreams as well.
Okay.
I decided to join Oliver's crew and the Dream Team last year to help, I guess, expand the brand and kind of give them a little representation from Texas.
Okay. Well, appreciate that as Texans. Well, John, I'm going to get off here and let you go. We're about out of time. I appreciate your time. I know everyone else here has enjoyed it, and we'll get back with you and schedule another time to talk some more.
Sounds good.
You have safe travels while you're at work.
Thank you.
Next time you're on the water, I hope you have tight lines. So
Appreciate it.
I will talk to you later, my friend.
All right, boss. God bless.
Take care. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed John Shin of Big Bass Blessings tonight here on Beyond the Paddle. I'm your host, John Suits. I want to thank you for joining us. You can find us on Facebook under John Suits or Greenfish Nation, or you can also look us up on Greenfish Nation Kayak Tournament Series Trails. We also have a YouTube channel, Bass Fishing with Greenfish Nation. Slide on over there and click that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate that. That allows us to get a little monetary means from YouTube so we can better service you guys, audio equipment, lighting, just things to make the podcast better, make the channel better. Until next time, I'm John with Greenfish Nation, right here on Beyond the Paddle. I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight.
Thank you again for joining our podcast. We appreciate your continued support. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Bass Fishing with Greenfish Nation. Check us out on Facebook at the group Greenfish Nation Kayak Tournament Series Trails and Challenges. We can also be found on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok under the handle Greenfish Nation. Thanks again, and until next time, I'm John, and I want to wish you tight lines, guys.